Welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got participants still coming in, so welcome. It's our August 17th webinar with LADD, and we're talking about the Disability Smart Home that LADD has built, as well as lessons learned. So I think we're just going to kind of jump into it. Everyone who is on this webinar, first of all, thank you so much for joining. And everybody who is on the webinar does get a free 30-minute technology, as far as GrandCare technology implementation uh, session with GrandCare. So if you're interested in learning more about the technology or anything you want to talk with us, you do get a free 30-minute session. So you can sign right up by emailing sales@grandcare.com, or you can just put something in the chat and we can schedule something with you. And also, this is being recorded, so this will be disseminated after the session. We'll be putting it on all the social media platforms, as well as allowing you access to the deck that we're using today. So all of our staff, as well as Brian's staff at LADD, are available to answer questions on chat. You can post things in Q&A, and you can also, I know some of you are watching from LinkedIn or other social media platforms. We do have staff available there to answer questions as well. But please feel free to ask questions, post questions the entire time during the presentation. This is going to be a very open and informal forum where we are going to basically ask Brian everything he knows about technology, life, and what they've done. So first of all, a word about us. I am Laura Mitchell. I am the CEO of GrandCare Systems. I am a co-founder, have been with GrandCare for the past 16 years. And what GrandCare is a remote monitoring, remote supports for disability and aging services population. A large 17-inch touchscreen, as you can see on the screen, and it offers a variety of cognitive assist, medication management, support task lists to do reminders, communications, video chats that are also HIPAA compliant. And it also communicates with a variety of telehealth and activity monitoring sensors that you can set up to alert staff if something seems amiss, if someone didn't get out of bed, if they didn't access their meds, if they didn't access the fridge at mealtime, if their blood pressure is too high, if they didn't take their glucose medicine, all sorts of things that you can implement in there. But I'm going to let Brian kind of tell you a little bit more about how you'll see how GrandCare kind of plays into the entire LADD strategy. So Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your organization.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be here with everyone today. So I am Brent Hart. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at LADD. We are a IDD provider agency in Cincinnati, Ohio, and in the Hamilton County region, if you're from Ohio here. And we are an agency that's been around for 47 years, providing services to adults with developmental disabilities. And a few years ago, we looked around what the state of our system was, and we realized that what we were doing in providing care to individuals with disabilities was not likely sustainable for the near future. We knew that there were more and more people that needed assistance. We knew that there was not nearly enough funding, there's never enough staff, and that we could do more. And so as an agency, we looked at it and said, what could we do? How could we be more efficient? And that's where Forever Home and Smart Living really came to be. It's our idea that as we look at all these problems that we have within the system of developmental disability services, what solutions could exist? And with technology advancing the way that it is, we jumped right in. So we've spent the last several years vetting the technology, looking at what models exist, how could we build upon our model, how could we grow, and really are innovating a new way of how we deliver services. So this is not, when you think about smart living and forever home, it's not just taking somebody who lives independently in the community and giving them a piece of tech or an iPad and their life has changed. It is taking the way we deliver services and using technology as the first mechanism of service delivery. So this whole adage of we have caregiving staff that go to the home just in case things happen, to wait for things for what if could happen, all those things. Technology has advanced to the point where it really can do that for us. And so if we take all of that out, then what we're left with is time where staff can really be value add, where they can provide meaningful support. And so our model, we are 3 years into it was 3 year pilot. We're still in the last year of it, where we combine smart home technology, wearables technology, so that when someone leaves the home, the technology can go with them, using technology based and remote supports, and then going from there. And so this is a quick slide. The Height Home is our first smart home that we had in the Cincinnati area. And it was a home that we built from the ground up. And it was different in that we weren't looking at just the 4 individuals that live there on how do we provide supports. This is our incubator home. This is where we have way more technology than any person could ever really need. And so this is where we find out what works, what doesn't work, and how do we continue to use it. And so we're a couple years in now. We are changing again the model of how we deliver services. Now we still provide traditional services because some people don't fit into this model, but we are really grateful for the state of Ohio in that they are a tech first state and they have, really aggressive in pushing technology. And then in Ohio, we have a county board system. So the county that we're in, Hamilton County Disability Services, really huge supporters, and we couldn't do without them. And then GrandCare, because at the end of the day, GrandCare is the base platform of which we provide services. There's a lot of other technology that goes into the main brain of how we work, but GrandCare is really the main touch point for how our support services are delivered. So that's a little about who we are. I think that about me, I've been in this field for about 15 years now. I've delivered services across many different states. I ended up in Cincinnati because I really wanted to work more with smart homes and deliver smart technology, and that's the only place that was doing it at the time, for what we were looking for. So that's where I'm at. I really love what I do. I believe that I'm a tech evangelist when it comes to these services sometimes. So excited to share what I have.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. And just the fact that you're sharing all of this with us is so great. I know that a lot of people came on excited to learn from you and to hear all about your experiences, because you've made mistakes for that other people don't have to make. And and you've learned from them, and you've figured out what does work, like you said, and what doesn't work. And we certainly have in the process learned a lot. As many people who know the history of GrandCare, we were designed with the aging population in mind. And when we partnered with LADD in 2019, they sort of helped us to figure out how to make our product more suitable for the disability population. And now I can say that our system has been built out so much so that um, we really see a very obvious complementary fit now for the disability world, and it's very exciting. Something else that's very exciting about this space is that a lot of these folks, and just hearing from some of your clients, it's the first time that they've ever been independent. So that that's a very different uh, different model than the aging population, because a lot of times it sort of feels like you're taking something away. Where with these folks, it's the first time they've ever been independent. Their parents are oftentimes very excited about them being independent for the first time. So it's a very enthusiastic model, and that's really gratifying to be a part of and to be able to experience it through stories that we've heard from you. So can you tell us a little bit more about the smart home itself?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about. I'll talk about the smart home, but really, as I've been talking with even Laura explaining, we are now up to 6 smart homes in the Cincinnati area, and in addition to those smart homes, we serve around 45 people in the area around us that live in a bunch of different settings. So we have people that live with their parents still. We have people that live independently, people that live in with a roommate. But for the smart home model, it really is about how do we use technology to provide the same level of care and support that we would as if we had staff in the home. And so the model that we've had, forever is that we staff depending on when a person is home. And the way that most service agencies and most states are funded, and this is no fault of any of the funding sources, how it was set up is that we are paid by physically existing in a space. So if we schedule around when a person is home and we get paid for showing up and being in the home when someone's there, we have outcomes we're working towards, but really that's not the mechanism of what the funding source at the state level is looking for. Now we're looking to really make some changes in that area and change and look, how do we look about more outcomes-based service delivery? But our smart home idea is the idea of how do we take whole home technologies, meaning the home automation stuff that we take for granted, like smart doorbells, smart lighting, smart music, sensory activities, and then add on to that smart appliances, camera systems, systems like our base platform system that we use with GrandCare, and how do we take all of these pieces together and then build them so that somebody receives the same, again, level of service they would as if staff were in the home. So it's not your typical remote support system that you may have seen where we have a call center and people are sitting around waiting for someone to push a button in a life alert or an ADT security model. Really, what we're looking at is how do we combine all these pieces of technology? They're giving our staff feedback. We're highly trained to know when to interact, when to reach out to a person, how to know that the person's going to need support, maybe even before they really realize it, just like we would if we had a DSP in the home. Now, obviously, if someone pushes a button, we're going to be there. That's a given. But it's really how do we be there for the person and more than just waiting for them to push an emergency button. And then how do we take technology and move it into the community as well? And so we wanted to make sure that just because we have our smart homes, that people are not stuck in their home. So that we use a lot of wearable technology that takes the person out of the home when they leave so that they can have the same level of support out the home. We've learned a lot from this because we found that when we were looking at what does a person need to be independent, we went through this whole idea of looking at what are all the needs, what are the solutions we have. And we found that for someone to receive the same level of support they would with if they had a caregiver, there's about 184 critical needs that a DSP provides when they provide service. It's a lot of things, and they're all critical to someone being independent and living healthy and safety. So how do we take that huge list and convert it to technology? And so then we looked, okay, what technologies exist? And we found that there is a technology solution for almost everything out there. The problem is, how do we make them work together? And most times they don't. And that's where GrandCare was really helpful because we found that with their system, we can connect in the sensors that we need for the house to know where someone is about the house or even potentially outside the house, the health data. So we can still collect the health information. We can take this information and then convert it over to other services we provide. So if we have someone who has a health concern, we can take health data, it plugs in and works in conjunction with the GrandCare system to help staff know what kind of health data we're receiving, be it weight, be it glucose, be it cholesterol, whatever. And then we can use, once we have that data in the remote support's brain, then we can use that also for the smart refrigerator and say, hey, when we're suggesting groceries, let's suggest healthier options. Or if we're looking at exercise, are we making sure that we're prompting exercise more often, tracking exercising? And so that's where the smart house really goes from beyond just having some systems where someone, we know if someone's home, they can turn the lights on and off to really providing a different level of support. And again, starting with the idea that we don't start with staff and figure out where can we add technology. We start with technology, and then whatever technology can't solve for, that's when we bring in the staff.
Excellent. And can you tell us just a little bit about how you vetted the technologies? Like what did you do that's saving them time from having to do this whole process? Like
Yeah.
what was,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
So I would say the daunting work is done, and my cohort who's on here, Hannah, who works in my department here at LAD, she takes a lot of credit for driving a lot of this as well. But we started looking at this again in 2017, 18, LAD did, and thought, well, there's got to be someone out there who is really driving this. And it's always easier to innovate off the back of somebody else, for lack of a better way to describe it. And we worked with a local, with Cincy Tech, which is a local group here out of Cincinnati. We have a local tech firm who we said, here's what we're looking for. We want to go beyond just, providing a life alert type scenario in a call center scenario. We want to provide actual support. Go find us somebody who's doing this, and we will work with them and be able to build off that model. They went and they looked, and they found that really there was no agency providing going as far as we wanted to. And so we said, okay, I guess we're going to have to do this on our own. So then the next step was find a platform provider who is doing something in the disability world or similar to it that we could partner with to begin. And so we looked at 23 different companies that provided some sort of two-way communication support, be it through disability or aging or whatever. And through all that process, we really did narrowed it down to GrandCare as our base platform for that area. But it didn't stop with just GrandCare. We had to also then look at what sensors do we need for the door, for the floor, for motion, for all those different areas, for even leak detection. And then we went into health and hygiene. A really great little anecdotal thing is, as we were looking at what is the best type of toothbrush to use, I personally vetted 32 different types of toothbrushes that we tried out, everything from something you get at Kroger or the grocery store to something that my dentist loaned me. And we found that the one from Target is the best one. And so there you go. We don't have to worry about trying, you don't have to put 32 toothbrushes in your mouth. We also looked at not just how well does it work, functionality, but how does it interact with the staff that are receiving the information? What type of data does it collect? Because some things we want data in the moment. If someone has a seizure disorder, we want to know right then they're having a seizure. If someone has poor oral hygiene, we can go back and look at that on a week or a 2 week or a monthly basis. And so it's not just determining what tech exists, because there is tech for almost everything, but is it meaningful? Can we use it for our field and our purpose? Can we connect it with other pieces of technology? And then can we make the information usable to the remote support professional? Because what we found is that when we started, we would have to use several computer screens, several tablets, just to keep a handle on what we were looking at. And now we've been able to reduce that in two ways. One, determining what do we need to know right now, what can we know later, but also starting to connect these dots to say, okay, if we have a device that gives us health data, and we have the devices that give us sensor data and location data, and we have the connection with GrandCare. Well, can all those just work from one spot? And we start building those connections. And so that's the work that we've done. We, like I said, have spent the last couple of years building this out. And what we found is that there's also lacking in training. So there's training in a few areas. Parents have not been trained to understand that technology is just as, if not more safe for providing service. It can provide better outcomes a lot of times. Our service sector was not ready. Now, I have to give credit to our service sector again here in Hamilton County. I don't know if there's anyone here from Ohio or anywhere, but if you ever wander through Ohio, Hamilton County, our developmental disability system, they are really on top of what we're doing, and they are fully invested in using technology. So our system, it didn't take a lot. They were bought into it, but other systems we've had to help convince that they need to look at this, and trainings for them, training for our staff. Someone who's been a DSP their whole life, how do we change the way they deliver services to not just wait for things to happen, but be targeted in their interventions? And then the individuals, so many times we have individuals we work with who have never used technology. And so we're giving them technology for the first time. Or we do this terrible thing in our system a lot of times where, especially with the younger generation, they use so much technology as they go through school, they age out of school, and then we put them in a setting in the community and they have no technology. So they start losing all this information they already had. So we're trying to build those trainings. And then our goal, I mean, at the end of the day, is that nobody should have to do this ever again. Like, it was an exhausting endeavor. It was an expensive endeavor. It was something that I still have nightmares about. Where are we going to find the next tech? Is it going to work? Is it going to fall apart? Are they going to work together? And so our plan is that we want to scale this out. It's not that we want to be a provider anywhere outside of the city that we're in, but our plan is that we want to work with other agencies that are interested in this and give them the tools. So we partner with Xavier University. We partner with our tech partners to build these things out. We partner with a technical writer to write technical guides and training guides, so that by the beginning of 2023, we can go to agencies and say, look, you want to do this? You don't have to go through this process. We can get you to that point.
Well, that is certainly a great help. I think that you saved
Yeah.
folks, years. So there are several questions on this, and I'm not sure how you want to answer this. But there are a couple of different questions in the Q&A that are wondering if you're going to publish a report that includes all of the 184 critical needs you identified in that consulting package and relate your tech recommendations.
Yeah, so we're in the process. So our vetting process went through a few stages. The first one is we worked with Xavier University School of Occupational Therapy to do research as we went through this, to look at a few things. One, what is the return on investment? So if we're going to go through this model and it costs 10 times as much, turns out Medicaid's never going to buy into it. So we had to see, what is the ROI of technology? They also looked at level of independence, because even if we do have all these great savings and staffing efficiencies, if the person's independence gets worse and doesn't get better, what's the point of doing this either? And then the satisfaction of the person receiving services and the staff delivering it. So we did a 3-year study with Xavier University's occupational therapy program that they published their data in April or May of this year. It was in the spring of this year. And what we found is that this cost of service is lower cost. The outcomes are better. The level of independence is greater. The satisfaction is greater. And not just a little bit. For some individuals we have, they're on a 12-point scale. made changes. And I'm going to look at my data in front of me so I have the right one. Their changes in independence went from a level 2 to a 6, or from a 4 to a 9. Like, those are huge jumps in independence. And it makes sense. When you're living in a group home or with your parents 24/7, they're doing everything for you. And all of a sudden, you have technology and it's enabling you to be independent. You're going to be more independent. If we take people away that are doing everything for you, naturally be more independent. But their satisfaction and their response on their independence is really great. So that's been done. That's published. The next phase is looking at the project as a whole and publishing data and a white paper on here's the whole project, not just these points we're looking at with Xavier. Now, the parts about just handing off a list of technology, unfortunately, whenever we do that, it doesn't work for anyone because they don't have all the other key components of how do we train, how do we make the shift, how do we connect the dots. So part of our toolkit that we're developing, we've learned is that it can't be a standalone. And so listing the critical needs is helpful, but what do you do with that? Listing a list of technology is helpful, but how do you acquire them? How do you make them work together? How do you train a staff member to actually receive the information and do something with it? So that's part of what we'll be providing as we start working with other agencies.
Excellent. Can you also speak to, if you built these smart homes? What about people who already have homes in place? Can they
Yeah.
put the technology? Okay, thank you.
So we
Talk
built
about that.
Yeah, we built one smart home. I want to be very clear. We built one. We have 6 full integrated smart homes. We built one. The reason we did that is for our incubator home, we wanted to have a lot of control over what we were doing. Now, the one thing we did not do is we did not hardwire anything in the home as we were building it, to the dismay of our builder. He would keep calling me and say, "Okay, we're about to put drywall in. Are you sure you
Yeah.
don't want to run the wiring?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." He's like, "Okay, we're about to paint. You sure you don't want to run the wiring?" And I would say, "Yes." And so we never did. And what we found is that forcing us to install technology after the house was completed. We got our occupancy certificate, we were done. Then we installed the technology. I now know exactly how many holes in the wall we're going to put if we install systems, how many outlets we're going to need, if we need to move any outlets, if we're going to have to do any infrastructure. What we found is that we've forced ourselves to think about this differently because we knew everybody can't remodel houses. There's not enough infrastructure to do that. And we live in Cincinnati where a lot of the houses are really old. So remodeling, basically, we're going to tear it down anyway. So we had to do a different way. So our technology and all the technologies look at is how do we integrate it into anyone's home now? And so what we're able to do with a bunch of double-sided tape, batteries, and Wi-Fi, that it can go into any home in any setting. And what's cool about it is the way that we've developed our idea of smart living. It's not that we're trying to sell someone, here's our remote support package. It comes in a box, has everything you need, will solve your world's problems. As we know, that doesn't work. And so our idea is how do we give someone the tools to do this and teach them how to do that? And then the individual is the one that drives what they need. And so it starts with an assessment. And the assessment tool we developed with Xavier University goes through and finds what are the needs of the individual, what technology works for those individuals, because what I need might be drastically different than you, Laura. You're probably more independent than I am. So I'm going to need a lot more tech. And so you're going to need a lot less in your house. I'm going to need a whole bunch more. And it's individualized to the person based on a really clear assessment tool. And then what's cool about it is because we've done it this way, we can do the assessment, we can find out what's going on, we can find out what we need, configure the technology, and then install it very quickly. And so when we were in the middle of COVID and we had emergency situations, we could do an assessment, we could program the tech and have it up and running within 24 hours. I mean, that's life changing for someone who can't leave their house or has an emergency need. What's also really cool about it is it gives us as an agency the flexibility to switch between services when we control all the ends of it. So when you're not contracting with another remote support provider, when you're doing everything in house because it's your people, you can have, if you have a staff that doesn't show up, the remote supports can cover that gap. If you need extra supports, they can cover those gaps. It allows you a little bit more flexibility in terms of our staffing as well. And I know this is now I'm going into my tangent, which if anyone sat through a webinar with me knows this is where I go. It's also allowed us to change the way that we staff our services. So typically our homes, when I say we have 6 smart homes, they're in 2 clusters. And a cluster of homes for us is 3 to 4 homes that are all within 5 minutes of driving of each other. None of them on the same block, not in the same cul-de-sac, but close enough where they can bounce between each other if they need to, but not so close that that's the cul-de-sac where all the people with disabilities live and they're not integrated in their community. With that system, if we were to provide 24/7 round the clock care, it typically requires about 16 to 18 in-person staff members. Using technology as the first method of service delivery, we reduce out all of the waiting around for stuff to happen, and our in-person caregiving team has been reduced down to 5. So now we have 5 staff members covering 3 houses for in-person services. It allows us to add more people. It allows us to pay those staff more, and they're way more engaged in what they're doing because they're not stuck trying to figure out how do I do everything for someone all day. Rather, they're looking at what are the targeted interventions I can provide. And so we are very lucky, knock on wood, that as the world is in a staffing crisis, we've been living in it, we're almost fully staffed. We have a few openings like we always will, but that's not our big stressor. Our big stressor is how do we find more houses? How do we provide more service? Not how do we get through this weekend? And that's what we're trying to solve with smart living is how do we help other people understand that we don't have a solution for this weekend. Like it sucks. It's hard. I know it's hard. You're going to have to try to figure out how to staff this weekend. But if you start thinking about technology now and start thinking about how do I innovate now? How do I change? You're not going to feel that way in a year on that weekend shift because you'll have systems in place and ways to fix it.
So we've had a couple questions about the Xavier study, and if you shoot an email to sales@grandcare.com, we can send you a link to that study as well as this recording and the pitch deck. So feel free to reach out to sales@grandcare.com, and we'll send you the exact link to the study. So another question that's talking about consent forms for the individuals to sign before using the technology. I can answer from the GrandCare end that we do have end user licensing agreement. So the first time any caregiver logs into our back end enterprise dashboard, you do have to sign an end user licensing agreement saying that you understand what the GrandCare specific technology is, what it does, what it doesn't do, and what it's designed for. Same thing goes for the first time that somebody uses one of our touchscreens. So is there another thing from a consent form, Brian, that you have your house individual resident sign?
Yeah, so we do. So we have, part of anyone's supports they receive, the majority of people we support receive Medicaid waiver through their funding. And so it's all part of their My Plan through assistive technology and things like that. So they receive that. There's certain consent forms that we have through our state system around remote supports. And then internally, we have consent forms that talk about the different technologies we have, how they'll be used. There are cameras. That's part of some of the technology. And what people don't realize is that when you remove a staff member and you need to have eyes on someone, a camera provides that eyes on. The difference is, and especially with GrandCare, we're not providing like CCTV all the time. There's no one sitting there watching round the clock. It's very targeted. So it's very similar to if someone needed support in their bedroom and they had staff in the home, they may call the staff into their room to provide support. Well, if they're doing that virtually, the staff would be virtually there. There are also some instances where the individual wants someone to provide vocal support, so they wouldn't need the camera. But each way we interact with someone, use technology, like if we're using a GPS or a tracking technology, we talk about that, we explain that. It's all part of kind of a master consent form that we use to show that we understand what they're using, they understand it. They can opt out. We have individuals who it's part of our process. If they don't want to have the systems on, they have a process of turning it off. And then what happens? What are their supports like in that case if they do that? And that's based on the individual. Some people, depending on how their individual support plans are laid out, we do provide some private pay services as well because we know that there will never be enough supports and services to provide for everyone who needs them. So we are trying to, through this project, create a private pay model that's affordable to the middle class as well. And so with those, they don't necessarily always have an individual support plan through the state. And so we would be developing something that we have on our own that still gets the same level of consent from them. Again, we want people to understand what the services they're receiving are and the technology, and also understand that it's there to help them, we're not babysitting, we're not Big Brother, we are technology-enabled supports.
Yeah. And that's so important to clarify that, because I think that sometimes people sort of can go right from the Flintstones to the Jetsons, and somehow we're kind of like right in between, right? And so where it's still a helpful support like anything else in your life would be, but it's not magic. So one thing I want to ask about is about the technology in the smart home. Can you talk a little bit just about what the smart home is like? Like what is it like for people that are living there? What is it like for the staff that are monitoring it? Describe a little bit of the layout, like what it feels like for the resident and what they're interfacing with as far as technology goes.
Yeah, and what we're hoping for is that when someone goes into their home, like it's least intrusive as possible. And so you don't walk in and see like 1,000 giant boxes and different things like that. What we're finding is as we go into someone's home, they will still see things like small sensors here, screens in different areas. Like at our smart home, the first one we had, I think there's 8 total touch screens throughout the home in bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchen, living areas. But what's happening is the individuals are just interacting and living their life. And so the sensors may be gathering information like whereas in the middle of the night, if somebody gets up to go to the bathroom and then goes back to bed, depending on the person, the staff may get an alert that someone went to their bed, but no interventions needed because that's what they do. If we have someone who has a specific eating disorder and they get up and are heading towards the fridge, it alert the staff to hop onto a screen next to the fridge to provide a verbal redirection back to them. And so it's a lot of the technologies in the background, but what the individuals see in the home is it's just a house. And that's what's really cool about it. And we have, if you go to our website at laddinc.org, LADDINC.org, you can find a virtual tour where you can actually walk through the house and you can see the technology. But there are, I mean, that you can see it. It's really, there are technologies you can see, like the screens, like you can see in this picture, that's a screen that's in a wooden box that our great guy Dan is interacting with our staff member Alexandra doing video chat. But also there's things like the floor sensor you can't see. It's in a corner attached to a baseboard, or motion sensors that just look like a little disc on a ceiling. And those kind of things really blend in because it's not about trying to be in someone's space. It's about helping them feel as least intrusive in their home and just be excited to live there. Some of the technologies like sensory technology, we have a sensory room where we can, in places where we can't, we put sensory technology in their bedroom. And that's a place where someone can go and if I'm feeling agitated, I can, turn on my calm setting and it might black out the room and play some soft music or play, if I'm not trying to be, if I'm feeling depressed, maybe I want to hear Guns N' Roses and I want the lights on and the windows open. So those kind of things, we use a lot of Alexa enabled devices to help control for people that maybe have a visual impairment or just want to talk to it. For those that have a verbal impairment, everything can be used through touch. One of the cool things we have is we have an individual who's hearing impaired and the alerts that would come through his GrandCare screen, if they're audio or audible, he won't hear them. And so we have a lamp that turns on a red light and he lights the color red. So he knows he has an alert. He needs to go check his GrandCare screen. And it may be telling him that his ride is there. It's time for physical therapy or a medication. And so the individuals interact with their technology a lot. But we've also found that the goal isn't to see how much can we have them interact with the technology, but how independent they can be. So what we're finding is they may actually be interacting with the technology less as time goes on, which is great. That means that they're just living their life and they need us less and less.
And so when you're using the technology, when you have these remote supports, you're setting up parameters, right? You can see some of the motion rules, things like that here to just basically only have to step in when needed, right? So you're not sitting there monitoring Jim 24/7 or
Yeah.
watching his motion activity. You just want to know when specific things occur.
Yeah, each person has a rules-based system that is set up for them. So, like I said, for me, it may be that I am not super independent, and so you get triggered rules to help direct me or give me care all the time. But you, Laura, might not need anything. It may be that we just want to know when you left the house, and we want to know when you left the house, like kind of where you're at and what's happening out there, or it's really based on what they're doing. So we're not just turning a camera on and watching all the time. It's not we're trying to keep people's lives as independent as possible, again least as intrusive as possible, and helping them just live their lives and be independent.
And there was a question about how you select residents to go together. Do they have the similar like
Yeah.
needs? Does it
you know
matter if
it's one of those things that I think if I somehow bounce out of this type of work, I think I'm going to move into like marriage matchmaking because I feel like that is a lot of my job. Is how do we help people find people they actually want to live with? We call this forever home. So our expectation is when someone moves in, they can live there as long as they want. And it's typically homes, groups of 4 work really well in a community setting. And so we typically start with one person. And then for any given house of 4, we have 37 to 40 people that we look at. I know that's what we did in the last home. And we try to find who has similar interests, who has similar levels of ability, who has similar goals, who wants to live in that part of town, who has different levels of need that we can provide, and that's how we match them together. We're pretty good at it. Out of all of our homes, we've only had one person who chose to move out, and it was more because her parents weren't quite ready for her to live independently. But typically, we find the same things any roommates have. You know, if you put four 25-year-old guys together, I don't care what their level of ability is, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be a dirty house sometimes and a really clean house sometimes, and they're all going to fight over food, and that's just life. But it's finding the right individuals. And so we believe, so we serve about 700 people here in Hamilton County, and we did a survey of our people and did some light assessments on them. And we found that about, for those that we are providing community-based supports for, about 25% of those who we serve are pretty low-hanging fruit, people that we can do a lot of technology with. We figure that about 40 to 45%, that's the maximum for full integrated tech first supports. And then everyone above that is just people that would receive technology as an add-on support. But really, that's a huge number when you think about all the time that is wasted with staff just sitting around with, not because they don't want to do something, but there's nothing for them to because the person isn't needed. And so that's where we find people that have similar needs, similar levels of support. We put them together. We have them before they move into a home. We have them spend a lot of time together. They go to dinner, they hang out. Sometimes they'll stay in a hotel, and we'll do supports with them there. That's what's really cool about the way our system is we don't have to retrofit a hotel. So we had a group of girls who were moving out together, a group of ladies, and a lot of them had never stayed away from their parents, let alone with roommates. So we rented some hotel rooms across town. We were able to go in before they got there when they were eating dinner and set up all the GrandCare screens and sensors and everything. And they stayed the night in the hotel, and we were able to provide a level of support as they would have in their home. And it gave them the peace of mind knowing they could do it, gave their parents the peace of mind they could do it as well. So that's how we do it. But again, it's a lot of like matchmaking. We go into it, we do a lot of assessing to find out if they're ready. A lot of times too, it's if the parents are ready. If the parents aren't ready, they might be the biggest downfall we had. If they're not fully bought into the idea that the person, their child can be independent, we might have to put them back on our wait list, which unfortunately gets longer by the day.
So talk about the parents a little bit.
Mhm.
I There was a question here, and I see that it was answered, but it was about a group of parents that are trying to monitor to help move their kids into these types of situations. They're maybe looking for a service provider that can help them. But is it possible for parents to be involved in some of the alert monitoring? Do you ever have do the parents? I mean, I know it's possible from a technology standpoint, but how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so full disclosure, we try not to have them involved in the alert monitoring from what we provide, because we provide services to adults who we want to live in the community independently. For those individuals who live in a parent's home and the parent may be their backup support, then they would get some alerts, but it would still be typically facilitated through our professionals or through a system that's set up. What we found is that we want the parents to be able to allow the service provider to do the work, to let them provide it. And we found that we do have parents who would like to receive all of the alerts and all of the camera access and everything that's going on, but then their child isn't really independent anymore. And so the parents are super involved. Sometimes it's great, sometimes to a fault, because that's how it works with a parent. I'm a parent, that's how it is with me too. But we do involve the parents on what does the transition look like. But again, when someone moves out, we set up the technology in the parents' home before they move. And so for individuals that move into one of our forever homes, they're living with mom and dad. They have GrandCare screens and sensors and toothbrushes and stuff in their home where they live to get used to it, to get comfortable with it. The parents learn how it works. So when that transition happens, it can be seamless. Now, for parents that are setting up for their children to live in the community, that would be a different scenario. So if they're going to be the main service provider, then yeah, they would have access to that and be the service provider. But if they're looking to help set it up and then bring in a support community, service community, then we could help work with whatever group that is to give them the tools they need. Our agency was started 47 years ago by parents. So I understand that is usually the driving factor behind why our agencies are set up.
Yep, and I can actually add on to that that if there is a group of parents that do not have a service provider, there's no reason why some of the onus would fall onto you then to set up the rule sets of when you want to be alerted. But we certainly have plenty of folks that use this in private home scenarios where they monitor a loved one, whether they're have a disability or aging or both, and they utilize it personally to communicate with them and send them reminders.
Yeah,
There's a
and
question.
we do have parents that they're not the means of support, but they use the GrandCare touch screen just to make video calls. So it's not there to provide
Absolutely.
support, it's just connection. Yeah.
Absolutely. And can you talk a little bit about daily checklists of what that's like on the touchscreen? There's a question about how to make, them accountable, or how to break down tasks, and how you
Yeah.
implement those task lists
Yeah.
into their lives.
So each person again is individualized. And so we look at what are the needs of them to do their activities of daily living, do their needed supports. And so we go through and find out what are the supports. Again, typically, if they're living with mom and dad or they're receiving supports from someone else, what are the things that the staff are doing? What is the support doing? And we start gathering those items, and then we build out what are the tasks that need to be collected. And so with the GrandCare system, they have different tasks that we can build into the system that can be checked off. If they don't get checked off, staff can be alerted. We can work with them on that. It's a lot of it's reminders. Some of it's like in the morning, reminding a task list of, okay, I need to shower, I need to shave, I need to brush my teeth, I need to get dressed, all of those things. And so it can be listed out that way. It could also be some things that are more critical, like I need to take a medication. And so if they don't check off that, the staff could be alerted someone didn't check that off. They could be paired with a medication dispenser that needs to let us know, hey, someone did not take their medication. We need to alert them. It's time to take their medication. And so task lists are a really helpful way for people to stay on task and to not stay on task, but keep track of the things that need to get done. Because especially if someone's had staff in their home around the clock, the staff go in and say, okay, Brian, time to get up. Brian, I got your clothes out. Brian, here's this. And so that's how those task lists can be built out for the individual to help them, again, be more independent and have control over what they're doing in their life.
Yep. And then the way that it's set up, can you talk a little bit about there's touch screens in the central areas, and then there's also private touch screens,
Yeah.
and they all sort of talk to each other. But talk about why,
Why so many?
well, no, I mean,
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Yeah, how do they work? Because we get asked that a lot. Like, why can't we just have one? Everyone wants to figure out, can't we just put one screen in the main area and it solves all our problems? And that doesn't work because everyone has different needs, different levels of confidentiality, different levels of sensitivity. And so in our main screen, like, let's say someone's in the rec room or in the living room, that screen will get very like high level household things. Like, here's the household calendar, here's alerts for the whole house. Here's reminders like we're gonna have a house meeting. But then let's say that I have a medication I need to take. Their alert will pop up on the screen that says, Brian, you have an alert. I'll either check my device or go to my screen in my room, and it will tell me, hey, it's time for this medication. What that allows for is it allows for me to know wherever I'm at that I have an alert that's personal to me, but not be in the living room and say, hey, Brian, it's time for your ibuprofen. So everyone knows that I take ibuprofen. They work in tandem with each other, which is really helpful for us because then they can kind of be anywhere and get that level of support. They also change on if someone's in the bathroom, like level of are there cameras that work in the bathroom or not, and what kind of tasks are available to someone in the bathroom versus what's in the bedroom. Also, like on my screen in my bedroom, I want to be able to call a family member, but on the main screen, we don't need the whole house being able to call that family member. And so that's why it's really important to have not just one to rule them all. There has to be one that's in the living area for everyone. Then in the bathroom, it might be for the two people that share that bathroom. And then the bedroom is really individualized for that person. And so that's why it's important. I was joking when I said, why are there so many? Because we get asked that all the time. Like, can't you just have one? Like, everyone's looking for what's the cheapest, easiest way to do this. And it
yeah,
really doesn't solve that. It's hard too, because in our system in Ohio, as progressive as we are, the house that we have with hundreds of pieces of technology, we're still governed under the same rules as if I were to duct tape an iPad to the wall. And so even though they are drastically different, we're still behind in changing the rule
yeah.
and changing the expectation.
Yeah, and there's a great question here. Can you talk about how you monitor using technology or other means for fatal conditions such as dehydration, seizure, etc.?
So I don't know. I mean, I've never had to monitor for dehydration. So I don't know about that one. Seizure detection is one that we are in a constant struggle with because if someone has convulsive seizures, there's some great technologies that can help alert for those type of things because a convulsive seizure, I mean, as simple as an Apple Watch can really help with that. Other types of bed sensors, wearable devices. A non-convulsive seizure is really hard to detect with technology. And so it might be that we need other methods of monitoring. Really, again, it's individualized. When I talk about the needs that we have, that 184 health and safety critical needs, 99% of those we have a good solution for. That 1% covers those 5 areas. It's like those hard areas of how do we solve for those areas. And it might be that maybe a person that has those those needs constantly, maybe they're not right for full tech integration, but just add on support technology. And what we say is if we have somebody that has 50 fatal, hard needs all day, every day, they need someone there all the time. If we can be more efficient in the people that don't need that, that's where we can put staff there. So for our population, again, we started with those that had, I would say, moderate needs. And now we're building out to higher needs. There will be people, though, that have really complex medical conditions where this might not be a good fit. But we're always trying to provide more and more support. With our first pilot home, we have individuals who had autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, a vision impairment, a gait issue, a verbal impairment, a hearing impairment, um, someone who had a history of aggressive behaviors. And that's kind of as far as we went because we wanted to go as far as we could without, going so far that we couldn't solve for everything and we're just trying to solve for one-off problems. Now technology is continuing to grow. We're always looking for new innovative way to solve for all of these solutions. We are in close talks with a lot of different tech companies to look at those other concerns. But there are things that maybe just we don't have a good tech solution for yet, or we do, but it has to be coupled with a support staff that's close by as well. If somebody
And I
has
can
a ventilator and if they are off that ventilator for a minute and they're going to die, a remote support or technology support is not a good solution for them. But it could be that the staff might be able to have 5 minutes of freedom, or their parents might have 5 minutes of freedom, knowing that they could get somewhere within a minute. Like that's the level of where that comes in with some of the higher needs.
Absolutely. And I can just add one more thing about dehydration. That is a common issue, particularly amongst the aging population. So we do have rule sets where if it's above a certain temperature, you could say, if it's above 90 degrees outside, please add to the touchscreen, it's hot outside, drink more water, or have another glass of water, or you can add that into their task list or their schedule. It's time for you to drink a glass of water. So there are things like that that you can do. We also did have a gal who had petite mal seizures way back in 2006, early in the day, and we had not an excessive monitoring. It was a wandering motion where it was kind of like your sleep number, and there was a wandering motion detected where if you trigger certain motion sensors in a certain period of time, the daughter would be notified. And basically, what it was before she would have these petite mal seizures, which she didn't know she was having and she didn't know she had, she would wander around her apartment. And then after, she would sort of wander aimlessly around the apartment and it would notify her daughter. And then she could call her and attend to her or head over there. So that is another way that we can sort of handle proactively or afterwards to say what did happen. So we're rounding at the end here, and I want to make sure that we get to the exciting part, which is the Xavier study. The outcomes, you would say, obviously, that this has been a success.
Yeah, I would, it's always so nervous because we never know when we decided early on in this project that we wanted to partner with a research institution to do the research. So it's not just anecdotal. Like whenever we do anything, it feels good, but does it actually work? Is there verifiable outside data? So they've been collecting data for last couple of years. And I always had this fear in the back of my head they were going to come back and everything felt good to me, but the data proved that it was totally useless. So that was my fear. We knew the cost savings were going to be there because physical people showing up to a space for periods of time without, value add, we know is expensive. And if we can use technology to reduce level of staffing, then that's obvious. But then what about the level of independence? And that's what's really cool too, that people change their independence. So we found in our first smart home we were able to reduce in-person caregiving hours by over 100 hours a week. Just let that sit in for a second. 100 hours a week that we were providing in-person care that we no longer needed to in-person support because of the use of technology. That 100 hours per week, those staff, we still have them. We just redeployed them to places they were more valued. It's a significant cost savings when you think about an agency providing for, not just significant savings to the system. It's a lower funded service, so it costs less. But at the end of the day, too, if you're an agency, you think of the cost of a person, how much lower it is if you don't have to have as many. When we have a ratio for the remote and tech-enabled supports of 1 to 20, that's a lower cost in all of your benefits for somebody. The cost of technology is was paid for really quickly. Less than 9 months, we had already found a return on this investment. That is huge. But we also find is we can provide more services. So every time we can save money internally, we can pay people more internally. Anytime we can save money to the system can provide services to more people within the system. And regardless of what state you're in and whether or not they have a wait list or they found clever ways of saying they don't have a wait list, there are still tens of thousands of people waiting for service in every state across the country. And so, how do we as agency providers be more efficient in what we do? The study, like I said, with Xavier was really exciting. I have a meeting this afternoon because we are about to embark on our second round of study with a group of occupational therapy doctoral candidates, which this group was master's candidates, master students that did this study. And so some of them have moved on to doctoral programs. And so we're going to be looking at more of that. We've also are looking at other universities who want to study this because we know that the more research we can have behind this, the better poised we are to get more buy-in from families, from systems, from Medicaid, from those areas. But it is really exciting. We held our breath when they said the data is ready to be published. We're going to send you a copy. I couldn't read it fast enough to find that it was significant for a cluster of homes. Even if the agency is able to maintain their margin, there's a 20% savings for the system. That's huge. You think about if you expand that out to all other areas of our service, all of that funding that could be used for other people that don't have services, all the manpower can be used for people who desperately need it. But then also the staff are more engaged. And that's what's cool about the Xavier study we found too, is that the staff and the individuals are more engaged in what they're doing. The satisfaction in their job is higher. Our retention rates are much higher. Our turnover is very low in this program. And like I said, we are almost fully staffed, which is, I know, an anomaly across the system because we are looking at it differently. We're not trying to say, okay, if we can recruit better, we're going to be able to solve the staffing crisis. I can promise you, there are not a pile of DSPs waiting behind a bush just for you to recruit better. You have to be better about the way you deliver services.
And can you talk at all about some of the problems that you used, like some of the hardest problems that you were trying to solve using the technology, and or was there anything that you learned that you didn't know and you learned from the technology? I mean, were there things that you thought that this person was living this kind of life and then it turns out that they needed supports and things that you just did not know?
Oh yeah, we found that. I'm trying to think of narrow it down. There was one individual we were serving who we thought um, wasn't safe in the community. We thought was fairly independent or not, couldn't be independent. Whenever he was with a staff member in the community, he would run away or elope from them and go into dangerous situations. And we thought, well, this person's just not safe. We need more staffing. When we finally narrowed it down and talked with the individual and started using technology, what we found is that he just wanted to be alone for periods of time. He's in his 50s and he'd never gone on a walk by himself. That's all he wanted. And technology was able to empower us to be able to provide that for him. We also thought that for some of our individuals who were living, we thought independently or thought were living healthy lives, once we added technology to provide in some additional support, we found maybe they weren't as independent as we thought. Maybe they weren't as healthy as we thought, and we could use technology to bring that up. We've also been able to use technology to help the transition. So when somebody moves from their parents' home to living in the community, you act differently when there's staff there all the time. When you pull the staff out and they, with the technology being the way it is with being least intrusive, you forget it's there. And so you're just living your life. And so it helps us to find where do we need maybe more counseling services? Where do we need maybe more mental health, physical health, sexual health, those kind of things, those type of services that can help someone be more independent. Really, each person that we serve, we learn a little bit more. We find that there are applications with this across the sectors. The things that we're learning in the disability field are not unique to us. They could be translated to the aging model, to mental health, to children's services. But for us, it's really impacting what we're doing. The people just seem happier. And when I say people, I don't mean just the individuals that are receiving support. The staff are happier. They feel value in the work they're doing. So many times they feel underutilized because the system is set up to underutilize them. And so now when they're providing services because they're the actual service the person needs in the moment, rather than just waiting around, that's changed too. So those are some of the things we've learned. We've also found that there's still a ways to go. Fall detection technology, not quite where we need it to be yet. We're trying to get there. We're continuing to work. There's still not, full integration of all supports working together. That's still a gap. And there are still some areas where I don't know what state everyone here is from, but there's some states where I think the service would be illegal to try to bill for it or your Medicaid service. So there's still a long ways to go, but I'm really hopeful for the future.
Okay, so there's a couple questions. There's a lot of questions in here, and we may not be able to get to all of them during
No
this
worries.
session, but we'll make sure to respond to them. There's one about dealing with aggressive behavior, if there's any
Yeah.
technologies that support that.
So what we found is I firmly believe in the fence at the top of the hill versus the ambulance at the bottom. So with an aggressive behavior, anything we can do to prevent that and get ahead of it is beneficial. So using sensory technology, using music, aromatherapy, light, nature, that's what helps us prevent it. And so what happens is we could set it up where if someone's using their sensory technology 5 times in an hour, well, clearly it's not working. And the staff can reach out and say, hey, Brian, seems like you're trying to calm down. It's not working. So before you go punch Laura, which is what you typically do, let's try something else. Do you want to try going for a
Let's
walk?
not do that.
Let's not do that, right? Let's grab your smartwatch. Let's go for a walk. And that's where we look at. Now, there are some that helping people understand self-regulation. You know, if someone has aggressive tendencies, a lot of times they know that they can feel it coming and they don't have anyone to talk to, they don't know what to do. So giving them tools in the moment, giving them staff that are available all the time, that is really helpful.
Okay, and another question, and this might be a longer answer. Mark is asking if you built Height House 2 and only
Yep.
incorporated the tech you think would be appropriate for those residents, what would the initial cost be? What would the monthly operating tech support costs be separate from
So from the DSP,
DSP?
yeah. So that's hardly, unfortunately, Mark, that's a loaded question because we have done that several times, but it's different for each house. I mean, on average, we say it costs about $11,000 with the technology, and then the operating. It depends on the individual's need. It's a couple. You know, I think at the end of the day, if we could hit $1,000 a month per person, that would be kind of the gold standard of providing affordable, meaningful supports. But I might have to send that out to you, Mark, and look at it a little deeper. And then the other question I did see, Amy, that I do want to answer is how do we deal with risky behaviors in the community? We lean into it. So just like we do with ourselves, with our children, with everyone else who may not have a disability, when we're worried about what they're going to be in the community, we prepare, we monitor, and then when something inevitably happens that's we're not prepared for, or something negative happens, we solve for it then. So we build in the dignity of risk. When somebody's new to an area, we'll drop them off and we'll say, go get lost. And when you don't know where to go, reach out to your staff and find a way to get back. You know, those are things that we're building into the system as well to help them be a part of their community.
And asking the question that everybody has on their mind: how do they get started? What should they do? I
Yeah.
mean, I know from our GrandCare standpoint, how we can provide them with systems, but how do they get started with the LAD model?
Yeah. So with the LAD model, I mean, the first thing I would say is start looking at your own agency and figure out where are you at. Do you have buy-in from your board? Do you have buy-in from your staff? Do you have buy-in from your individuals you're supporting? Is your system even set up for it? If it's not, then that's where you would start. If you feel like you're poised and ready, that's when you would want to reach out to me. Like I said, we in the beginning we thought, well, we can start doing this and we can grow and we can be the biggest agency in the world with this. And we realized really quickly that's not our desire. Our desire is to stay where we're at in our little community, continue to provide the best supports and be a model for what other people could be. And so our goal at the end of the day is to provide other people to receive this service. So we are developing our toolkit. Part of that toolkit was waiting for Xavier to finish their research, which is done, to finish out some of the little tech pieces that we had in developing connections of dashboards and mobile apps and things like that to connect the dots and then wrap up those training modules and training guides. But our goal is that by the beginning of January, we'll be able to help other agencies get set up. Now, I know a few of you on this call. I can see a few familiar names, and they will tell you that if you reach out to me, I will probably say, okay, here, take this and start with this. Okay, why don't you try this assessment with a few people, see how it works? You know, there's based on where you're at, there are places we can help you get started. But the full scale approach is something we're hoping to develop and implement by the beginning of the year so that you can do it everywhere. Because I really believe that if this is not something we're doing everywhere across the country, it's not going to take off. And I don't know if our system can exist in 10 years if we don't do something different. I've looked at enough economic studies of what's happening in our system. I know last Wednesday, there was an article in Politico that if you have not read, that was titled People Will Die Waiting for Services and about how our system is on the verge of collapse. If you haven't read that story in Politico, I would go and read it. But it's true. If we don't find something different, it's not gonna continue to exist. So If you have a better system that doesn't involve technology, I would love to see it. I don't know if it exists, but if you're interested in this and you're looking at, reach out to me, and also reach out to GrandCare, because there might be things that's all you need. You might not need a full scale system. Maybe just the GrandCare system is what your agency may need, but it may be building it out together. We work with GrandCare very closely because we believe that that is a really great base platform model to build the system around.
And I can also say that if you do want to learn more, reach out to Brian from LAD. Also reach out to
Yeah.
GrandCare, because we can talk you through some of the things that we've learned. And if you are ready to get started, you can get started right away. And we've got a lot of lessons learned, as well as we can talk through some of your strategies and goals. And someone's asking, what is the political? Oh, I think Hannah's
I can I can
that.
I can drop that in there if someone needs it. I've got it on
Okay.
my desktop. I was just giving it to someone else. So
Yep. And so reach out to us. You can reach out to, we've got the lab contact information or the GrandCare contact information. Reach out to sales@grandcare.com or info@grandcare.com, and we are happy to provide you with a link to the Xavier study. We can set up a 30-minute free consultation with the GrandCare staff if you'd like to learn more about implementation, training, all of that kind of stuff. And also, we'll share this recording. Thank you so much, Brian. This has been so helpful, and
thank you.
we sure are appreciative. I've already seen a bunch of comments that were very appreciative that you have taken an hour of your time to share this with us.
Hey.
Obviously not getting paid to do this, so thank you so
No.
much for offering that.
Well, thanks for giving me the soapbox. Anyone that knows me knows that if you give me a venue, I will take it gladly. So
Well, great. Thank you all,
have a
and
great day.
feel free to reach out to us. And have a great day.